building a home. I mean, it's the ultimate dream project, right? But, and this is a big but, one wrong turn can transform that dream into an absolute financial nightmare. So today, we're going to break down the most common mistakes people make and, way more importantly, how you can steer clear of them. Let's make sure your dream project stays a dream.
So, you're thinking about it. I get it. You're picturing that perfect kitchen, maybe a custom addition, a home built just for you. It's such an exciting, creative process.
But with those big dreams comes some really big risks. The path to that dream home is just littered with pitfalls that can drain your bank account, seriously test your sanity, and delay your project for years. So, how do you protect yourself? Well, let's find out.
Okay, look at this number. $300,000. No, that is not a typo. That's how much extra a homeowner paid because of a single mistake, hiring the wrong contractor. This is exactly the kind of financial disaster we're here to help you avoid.
So, here's our game plan for today. We'll start with that critical planning and budgeting phase, then we'll move into hiring your team, and then cover the mistakes that happened during the actual build. And finally, we're going to pull it all together into a simple blueprint for success, a framework we'll be building on through this whole thing.
All right, let's dive right in at the very beginning because honestly, the most expensive errors are often the ones made on paper, long before anyone even thinks about swinging a hammer. This is all about that first pillar of success, solid planning.
All right, mistake number one, and it's a big one, vagueness. Kicking off a project without a crystal clear plan of what you're building and exactly how much you can spend, well, it's just a recipe for disaster. It leads to this thing called scope creep.
And this is exactly what happens. Imagine this. A homeowner starts out with an $80,000 plan for their kitchen, but then, midway through, they think, ooh, what about custom cabinets? And then, hey, let's get those high-end appliances. Now, each one of those changes seems pretty small on its own, but together, they doubled the budget and added 3 more months of delays. That is scope creep in action.
And that just flows right into mistake number 2, hiring a designer or an architect who creates this beautiful vision that you simply cannot afford to build. Your architect has to be your partner in financial reality right from day one.
Just look at the domino effect here. It's wild. An architect estimates a second-story addition is going to be about $320,000. But when the actual construction bids come back, the lowest one is $575,000, and that doesn't even include finishes or fees. The project just grinds to a halt and the dream gets put on hold, all because that initial design wasn't grounded in real-world costs.
Okay, so your plan is solid. Now you've got to build your team. This is where our second pillar, partnership, comes into play. And it's where so many people make a fatal assumption that the lowest price is the best price. Let's talk about why that's almost never true.
And this brings us to mistake number 3. Oh, it is so tempting, isn't it? You get 3 bids, and one is just way, way lower than the others. You feel like you just won the lottery. But that low bid, it's usually a mirage, and it's hiding a desert of hidden costs. And this is the secret weapon they use, the change order. A contractor might intentionally leave stuff out of their low bid because they know they can add it back in later at a much higher price once you're locked into the contract. Oh, you wanted doors on those cabinets? Yeah, that's a change order. It's the classic bait and switch.
This chart, wow, it really tells the whole story, doesn't it? You start with that super tempting low bid, but what that price is hiding are the inevitable costs of fixing shoddy work. Failed inspections, improper waterproofing that leads to mold, using cheap materials that just break. Remember that $300,000 overage from the beginning? This is exactly how it happens. The so-called bargain ends up costing you double.
Okay, let's talk about mistake number 4. This is the ultimate DIY temptation. You think to yourself, hey, I can manage this project myself and save that contractor's fee. On the surface, it sounds pretty smart, but in reality, it can be the single most expensive mistake you make.
So what does it actually mean to be an owner-builder? Well, it means you become the general contractor. You're on the hook for absolutely everything. Hiring every single tradesperson, scheduling them all, pulling the permits, passing the inspections, and managing a budget that's hundreds of thousands of dollars. It is a full-time, expert-level job.
So, let's break down the perception versus the reality here. On one hand, you think you're saving that 20% markup, but what you're not factoring in is the value of your own time, we're talking hundreds of hours. Plus, the inevitable delays, wasted materials from just not knowing what you're doing, and the fact that you don't get any professional discounts on labor and supplies.
And this right here is the bottom line. Just look at these numbers from a real-world case. The professional contractor's all-in price was just over $1 million. The homeowner, who decided to act as the owner-builder, ended up spending over $200,000 more for the exact same project. And that's not even counting all the stress and the legal liability they took on.
All right, so let's say you've planned everything perfectly. You've hired an amazing team. You're still not out of the woods. There are still mistakes you can make during the construction itself that can completely derail the project. This is all about our third pillar, trusting the process.
So, the mistakes that happen during the build, they usually fall into these 3 big categories. And honestly, they're all about equally damaging. Trying to handle complex selections yourself, cutting your architect out of the picture too early, and just flat out ignoring the processes your team has in place.
Let's just quickly break these down. Mistake number 5. Trying to DIY complex finish selections. That $20,000 bathroom can easily spiral to over $50,000 with just a few unguided choices. Mistake number 6. Sidelining your architect once the permits are approved. This is a huge error. They are the guardian of your design vision. Without them, your custom home can turn into a generic, cookie-cutter house really fast. And finally, mistake number 7. Bypassing your team's processes. Going directly to a subcontractor with a change can cause this chain reaction of mistakes, adding tens of thousands of dollars and months to your timeline.
You know, I absolutely love this analogy because it is just perfect. You hired professionals for their expertise. Trusting their process isn't about giving up control. It's about making sure you actually get to your destination safely and efficiently. You wouldn't try to fly the plane, so don't try to run the construction site.
So we've walked through all these potential disasters. How do we actually guarantee success? Well, like we've been saying, it really just comes down to those 3 fundamental pillars.
Here it is. This is your blueprint for success. It's that simple. First, meticulous planning. Know exactly what you want and what it costs before you start. Second, true partnership. Hire a great team that you trust and can actually collaborate with. And third, respect the process. Trust the systems your professionals have spent years perfecting. Planning, partnership, and process. That is the foundation of a successful build.
And really, that's the final question you need to ask yourself. Is your project's foundation built on planning, partnership, and process, or are you just leaving it all to chance? By focusing on these 3 pillars, you're not just building with wood and nails, you're building with confidence and a clear path to success.